Welcome to How to Become a Criminalist with the California Department of Justice. My name is Dr. Jim Higgins, and we're happy that you're here to take some time to learn about the job of criminalist here at the department, as well as to learn about how the department really is a terrific place to work, and a criminalist position is a very interesting position. And then finally, we're going to share with you some information about the examination process and how to apply. We're joined today with a number of guests. We have Nadina Georgie, a senior criminalist here and at the department. She works as a forensic toxicologist. She's done so for over 25 years, has testified in court over 125 times. She analyzes blood, urine, other bodily fluids for the presence of alcohol and other drugs in post-mortem and antemortem cases, and the identification of solid dosage materials. We're also joined with Nathan Himes. He's also a senior criminalist, and his specialty is the analysis of crime scene evidence for the presence of blood or other bodily fluids, DNA analysis of forensic samples, interpretation of results, and testimony as an expert witness in court. So I'd like to encourage you, just before we get started, I want to make a plug that the department is a great place to work. We encourage you to visit our careers page at oag.careers.gov. We also encourage you to look for us on Facebook or join us on LinkedIn. You can also send our recruiters an email, and our recruiters are with us here today. We have Nishu White and, Lorene White and Nishu Singh, and we also have Shelley Long, who is a benefits expert here at the department. Okay, just to begin with, the Bureau of Forensic Services. This is where criminalists typically work, and here at the California Department of Justice, the Bureau of Forensic Services provides high-quality, impartial forensic service in the interest of public safety and justice. That's the overall context. One of the great things about the department is we have multiple locations across the state, which means we have multiple labs. You can see on your screen we have Eureka, Redding, Chico, Santa Rosa, all the way down to Southern California, such as Riverside and Santa Barbara on the coast. So one of the great things about working at the department is you do have the option of actually transferring locations as positions may be available, so that you don't actually have to, if you're interested in working for the department, you don't necessarily have to move somewhere else, but there may actually be a lab in your area. Overall, we have about 443 positions in this particular division, 377 technical staff, and 66 support staff. Now let's talk a little bit about the Bureau of Forensic Services. You may ask yourself, so what exactly do criminalists do? And we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. As part of an introduction, some of the services that we provide is we mentioned BFS operates a network of laboratories throughout the state in areas that are not served by a city or county forensic laboratory. And they provide services such as analysis of controlled substances, maintaining the DNA data bank, digital evidence, trace evidence, biology, tool marks, firearm studies, crime scene recreation, clandestine labs. All these various areas require criminalists to apply their analytical and technical abilities in the forensic field. One area that criminals work in is an area called latent prints. So what does a latent print person do, someone who's focusing on that? Well, analysts provide field responses by processing major crime scenes in clandestine drug labs. They also process submitted evidence to look for latent or invisible prints that have been left on evidence or crime scene locations. They have to go and basically determine where prints might be, identify them, and hopefully be able to match them against a known suspect or collect them for use in further investigations. is a particularly challenging area of expertise because if you go out in the field, there are smooth items such as plastic bottles. There are porous items such as clay materials. They're plastic. There are all kinds of different substances or materials on which a latent print, a criminal may have accidentally left some evidence of who they are by providing a print. And so the criminalist has to go and find those prints, figure out a way to lift them, and then bring them back to the office so that they can study them and find the bad guys. Another area is digital evidence. This is a really emerging area here at the department. They're actually establishing essentially a division that is going to focus on the analysis of today's complex digital evidence. And so in this particular division, they're going to be examining computers, cell phones, smartphones, tablets, other such devices for forensic evidence of human trafficking, drug trafficking, child pornography, or other crimes. And so this is really kind of a cutting-edge field where it's evolving very rapidly, and it provides an avenue for criminalists with certain types of technical expertise to really grow into an area that's up and coming. Now, as we talk about DNA analysis, I'm going to turn it over to one of our colleagues who will then pick up and talk about what they do from a first-hand perspective.
So as a DNA analyst, I'm going to examine items of evidence for the presence of blood or other body fluid. So we're going to examine all kinds of different crimes. We're going to have most felonies, homicides, rapes, burglaries. All of these could potentially have DNA analysis done, being that biological material could be left behind. So my first order of business is to identify the body fluid I'm dealing with or potentially dealing with. So I'd look for blood, I'd look for semen. I'd also look for things like touch DNA, so DNA from someone who may have handled an object. So for instance, if someone picked up a pen or handled a doorknob at a scene, they could potentially be leaving their skin cells and therefore potentially be leaving their DNA at the scene. I can then test that DNA and compare it to a known individual who they may have as a suspect, or I can compare it to kind of what you have on the screen here, which is discussing the DNA data bank a good bit. So the first part of your screen there, you're showing not all the labs in BFS actually have DNA capabilities. So Central Valley, Fresno, Redding, Riverside, Sacramento, Santa Barbara, and Richmond all have DNA laboratory capabilities. The other labs do not, so they'll kind of send their DNA cases to the local laboratory that has DNA analysis. Below that, you're seeing the Jan Bashinsky laboratory. That's our Richmond laboratory. And they kind of run the DNA database program where we have DNA samples from convicted felons and particular arrestees, which will have their DNA samples submitted into the DNA data bank. And then as a DNA analyst, I can search a profile that I obtained from evidence in hopes of associating an individual, a suspect potentially in that case. We're kind of providing that investigative information to the investigating agency. So the Richmond laboratory also has a small caseworking unit, but they have a very large DNA data banking unit that's in charge of developing those profiles from individuals and putting them into the data bank and building that data bank of individuals for searching purposes, both at the state level but also at the national level. So if I have a profile that does not find an association at the state level, that'll get further pushed up if it's suitable to the national level, and I can search cases and individuals from Virginia, from North Dakota, from wherever that they've entered these samples through this CODIS system, the Combined DNA Index System. The Richmond Laboratory also does a lot of research and development for our DNA techniques, so they will test out new technology and disseminate them for further validation at the regional labs that you see above.
Okay, our next presentation is going to be on toxicology, and so I'll turn it over to our next guest.
Good morning. This is Nadina Georgi. I work at the toxicology lab in Sacramento, and in our laboratory we are analyzing blood and urine samples. Most of our cases are going to be DUI cases. These are individuals who have been driving possibly under the influence of alcohol, but also with or without alcohol, under the influence of drugs. those are most of the cases that we're dealing with. We also do deal with some rapes and some murders cases, but the bulk of it is the DUI cases. So we get the samples in from the various agencies. We're going to look to see what drugs are present. And that's just the first part of looking at the case. The next part is then going to be looking at the police report associated with the case and giving an interpretation, combining the police report with the drugs found. The ultimate question that is usually asked of us is, was this person impaired due to the drugs? They may be driving with drugs in their system, but doesn't mean that they were actually impaired and unable to safely operate a motor vehicle. And that's the question that I'm asked most. And in combination with my analysis and that police report, I'm going to answer that question to the best of my ability. We work on instruments called GCMS, which is a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. That's most of our instrumentation that we use. We are looking to get other ones in and hoping that we can get that up and running soon. We are the only toxicology lab in the Bureau of Forensic Services, so we actually do cases from the entire state. We go to court up in way northern California. I was up in Wairika a few months ago, and all the way down to El Centro, which is down in the southern part of the state. So we really do travel for court a little bit more than some of the other laboratories. That's definitely part of what we do. So, yeah,
okay.
sorry, that's, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Next, our recruiters, Lorene and Nishu, are going to ask some questions of our guests, and so I'll turn it over to them.
Okay, I'll start with you, Nathan. I just wanted to ask you, what drew you to the California Department of Justice?
Well, I've only been with the Department of Justice for about a year at this point. I originally worked for about, I guess, 8 years as a forensic scientist with the Virginia Department of Forensic Science. And I kind of grew to like that, the state system where you're working in a one laboratory of a larger agency. And particularly DOJ had that to offer. They are a large state system, and they have the ability to have a research and development program where one of the laboratory's main tasks, such as Richmond in our case, is tasked with the idea of finding these new technologies, testing them out, finding what works best in our system, and validating them on a very developmental stage to determine the weaknesses, the drawbacks, or the positives of any of these techniques. And then they can disseminate those to the relay system. In this case, we have a new DNA extraction system has been validated and sent up to us. And then I was in charge of validating it in our laboratory using our instruments. So it's nice to have that larger system where you can look at all these new technologies and not really take you off casework because you have that dedicated group to do that. So it also helped that DOJ was located in Sacramento, which is where I was looking to relocate to. So the ability to have all of those regional labs across the state, a large state system which gives you support and the input from a lot of other analysts throughout the state, is just great. That's what kind of drew me into DOJ.
Okay, thank you, Nathan, and I'll throw that same question to you, Nadina. What drew you to it?
I'd been working in the field for a number of years prior to coming to DOJ. I first started out in a laboratory in Oakland. It was a private lab, but it was a place where I really learned a tremendous amount, worked with really good people. Unfortunately, due to financial circumstances of the lab, I felt it was time to move on. I ended up working in a couple of other labs in between, but never really found quite the same experience that I had in that first laboratory. And that's what I found at DOJ. This was more the type of work I wanted to do. I had gotten into doing stuff that wasn't quite in the same forensic realm that I wanted to do, whereas DOJ, that is what we do. I love that our lab is small. I work with really good people, really knowledgeable people, people who really care tremendously about what they do. And so for me, it is so reminiscent of that first lab that I worked at, and with the added benefit of not having to worry about that financial instability of a private laboratory. Working for the state, not that it's always a guarantee of continuation of a job, but certainly a lot less, just a lot less instability. And I really appreciate that. I feel like, okay, this is going to continue. It's not at the whim of shareholders or other issues. And so for me, that was definitely a big draw. And like I said, also the quality of the people that work here.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. And Nathan, we're interested to find out if you've ever worked on a specific case where you felt like you've made a difference in someone's life.
Sure. There's lots of cases that you work in. Every one you somewhat anticipate to make an impact on someone's life, for better or worse. But there's always certain cases that stick with you, and when I worked in Virginia, I know I had a case. I was essentially doing the same work. We were called forensic scientists there, but I had a cold case that I was working in which a 9-year-old girl was kind of abducted and assaulted underneath a bridge on her way home from school, and for 15 years or so, this case was just dormant, no suspects. But they did have and retained DNA evidence from that case, or well, what turned out to be DNA evidence. They didn't realize it at the time, but through processing that case, we were able to identify an individual in the DNA data bank. And interestingly enough, when they went to arrest him, he found he had an identical twin, which from a DNA standpoint, that's kind of the way out. Identical twins are going to have the same exact DNA profile. So from looking at an entire population of people who could have done this crime, we've narrowed it down to 2 people who, based on DNA, could have equally had a chance to supply that DNA. So they had actually found that one of the individuals, one of the twins, was deported about 10 days before the incident and left his fingerprint on the deportation papers. So they were able to compare that print, and identical twins will not have the same fingerprint, so that was good evidence pointing towards the other twin as having committed the incident. So that's kind of one that stuck with me, but it definitely made a difference. I don't know how much the young girl remembered of the incident, but I'm certain it made a difference in someone's life in that case.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Nadina, we're also interested in knowing if you've worked on any cases or you felt like you've made a difference in people's life.
As Nathan said, yeah, every case affects someone in some aspect, whether good or bad, not necessarily in the way they want it to. But yes, I worked on one. It was a vehicular manslaughter. This is an individual that was driving and crashed into somebody and killed, I believe, 3 people in the car. And part of my job is testifying and giving interpretation of those results. It is not to go in and be the prosecutor and to make the case for the prosecutor. But in this particular case, when I was able to assist the prosecutor in doing his job and, you know, making this person accountable for causing this accident, I do like that. That is part of what I feel I do. On the same token, though, there have been cases. I talked to prosecutors a lot about, like I said, interpretation of the cases. And there have been times where, after doing the analysis, reading the police report, I don't feel that there's enough to go forward with it, and the prosecutor ends up dropping the case. And those cases I also feel good about, because it's not always about showing that a person's guilty. It's also about showing that they weren't and that it's not worth prosecuting. And I think that that's important, and I think that's an important part of my job as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. All right, so I just wanted to ask one more question of each of you. Nathan, what's the most challenging aspect for you about being a criminalist?
I think being a criminalist at large, the problem is always the most difficult thing that I find is often explaining the scientific in layman's terms. So you have to put on your scientist hat while you're in the laboratory and think like a scientist, and you're speaking to your colleagues in scientific terms, but you're also then responsible for explaining that to a judge or jury in terms that they can understand. Because all the science in the world isn't going to be helpful in a forensic setting if you can't explain it to help the trier of fact kind of determine guilt or innocence, because it's them who are making the decision using whatever information you found, whoever that information may support. So that's kind of a challenging aspect as a criminalist as a whole. As a DNA analyst, I always find interpreting, you know, three-person mixtures that are low level, very small amounts of DNA are always difficult. But certainly as a criminalist at large, you're kind of balancing that science and lay terms positions.
Thank you, Nathan, and I'll ask the same question of you, Nadina.
Well, and again, as Nathan said, definitely balancing that scientific aspect, but also the explanation aspect is there. And for me, as a toxicologist, there's always new drugs coming out, and keeping up with that and keeping up with new things that people may be ingesting. And also, there's a balancing act between feeling confident and giving an opinion, and that's, again, what I do in court is give an opinion about a person's impairment, being able to confidently support that opinion, but also understanding that it is not necessarily the only opinion. And so it's that, for me, again, it's a balance between being confident but being open to other possible explanations, other opinions, and sometimes also it is a science, and people expect it to be cut and dry, and it's just not always. The analytical part is, but the interpretation is not always cut and dry, and that is sometimes a challenge for me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question I'd like to ask. Is it's clear that criminalists do a lot of complex, difficult, challenging, but I'm going to assume that at least a fair number of people on our webinar, they may just be coming out of college. They have their degree in biology or chemistry, and so they're thinking like, okay, I may know nothing about this stuff. You know, aside from the science, like you're saying, there's a lot of art and you know, developmental knowledge that goes into becoming a high-level, you know, criminalist. But at least it's important to know that for the department, the criminalist is the doorway. So it's not expected that you have a whole lot of forensic knowledge. I wanted to ask our guests, Nadine and Nathan, if from their perspective, what kind of support does a new person get when they come in and they're brand new to the forensics profession? Either one want to jump in?
Yeah, I will. That is the impressive thing, again, with the Bureau of Forensic Services, is there is a tremendous amount of support. You do not need to already know everything that you need to know to do your job walking in the door. I happen to come in with, again, a number of years of experience, but even with that, DOJ has a very formalized training program. I had to show proficiency in doing the analytical work. It's pretty much the same analysis I've done at other labs. That's great, but I still had to go through the same process, showing that I understood the analysis, showing that I was proficient in doing that analysis. In addition to that, there is other training. The interpretation is a big part of what we do. That I didn't have as much experience with coming into DOJ, and there's a big push for us in the Tox Lab to get people training to help them with that. There's formalized training that we go to. It's also a discussion among us. We talk about cases with each other to help even experienced people. Again, it's interpretation, so there's always some thought that has to go into it and really decide what we feel is the best interpretation. So we discuss it with new people. So there is a tremendous amount of support. We have a number of new people that have started, and only a few of them have had experience in any type of forensic setting, much less in toxicology, but they are given the training and they are not going to be doing casework or doing interpretation until they're at the point where the laboratory and they themselves feel comfortable to be able to do that.
I've found a similar experience, and I came in also with some experience, so I still had to train in the methods and techniques that this laboratory uses. So not every laboratory in the country is going to use the same techniques. The science is the same, and the data that you get out is typically the same, but there's lots of different ways to get there. So I did find DOJ is extremely supported and really committed to the training process prior to working any kind of casework, which is what you'd expect and want from any kind of agency doing this type of work. From a DNA standpoint, and then a lot of the other criminalist disciplines that are out there, I know will send their trainees through the California Criminalistics Institute, CCI, and they provide coursework for those, especially that come in with no experience or very little experience. They're going to attend all the coursework and all the classes that are very geared toward the science that you're going to be doing. And that takes a good bit of time. I know me coming in with experience, I was able to just do kind of testing on my own to know, following the training program that we have in place, and complete that. And it took me about 6 months, but I know a new analyst is going to take in upwards of a year to go through all of the coursework, complete all of the testing that needs to be done before they're actually let loose on performing casework on their own. So the laboratory is very committed to training. We're also required to have additional training throughout the year just to keep up with new technology. So that's over and above the initial training for your casework competency.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on now to the next stage where we're going to talk a little bit about employee benefits. And Shelley, who was invited because this is really her area of expertise, there are probably some people on the phone who may not be thinking much about retirement, but that's certainly one of the great parts about the state. So Shelley's going to talk about that, and also talk a little bit about the very good health benefits that the state offers. Shelley?
Good morning. My name is Shelley Long, and I work here at Department of Justice in the Human Resources Office. And as you can see on your screen, there's a little picture there for retirement. An estimated 30% of your gross is paid into a CalPERS retirement account for you. The breakout of that 30% is that 11% you pay from your own gross, and then the state pays a little over 19% into retirement on your behalf. The state has several different categories. For the criminalist, their category is the safety category, and when you get ready to retire, when you get up to retirement age, persons who are new to the state on or after January 1st, 2013, they're going to fall into the PEPR category, and that is 2% at age 57, and then those people that were first employed prior to January 15th, 2011 fall into the Formula A category, and that's 2.5% at age 55. And then those people first employed in that particular group between January 15th, 2011 and January 1st, 2013, those fall into the category B formula, which provides them 2% at age 55. Essentially, when an employee is at retirement age, depending on which category they fall under, the state looks at either a 36-month period of time for their highest salary, and then that's where this formula comes in, or if they were hired prior to January 1st, 2007, the state looks at the highest average of a 12-month consecutive period. When an employee is considered vested and eligible for retirement once they have worked for the state for 5 service years. There are some people that have worked for reciprocal groups, for example, UCLA. Those people may have different eligibility for their retirement and qualify them, even though they may be new to state with their hire date after January of 2013. They may have worked for UCLA or some other lab or some other retirement system that has reciprocal, I don't know how to explain reciprocal. They have reciprocal applications where they may fall into a higher, into the category B or category A, depending on whether they've worked for other agencies or other groups that have that relationship with the state. For more information on the retirement, they can take a look at CalPERS website in their publication. Publication number 7 speaks about retirement in particular for the safety category, and publication number 16 talks about changing retirement systems if you're moving from a UC system over to the CalPERS system.
So if I can just jump in, Shelley, and add a couple of things, just to kind of summarize, because I know that there are probably some people who are on the call who have some experience working for the public sector, and some may be brand new. So let me give you just the high points. High point number 1 is the state has a defined benefit program, which means unlike many private employers who, when you retire, you really don't have any idea what you're going to get because you're primarily investing maybe in a 401k. Working for the state, because as Shelley said, the state puts in about 19%, you put in about 11%, that's going in to fund your retirement. So that when you retire, there's actually a formula that you can use at any time to calculate what your actual retirement will be. And it's something like, when Shelley's talking about that 2%, 2.5%, whatever, what that's really saying, and I'm going to just use the PEPR as an example, you take your highest pay for, say, I'm just going to use as an example, let's say it's a 12-month period if you're in that particular group. Your highest pay times 2% times your years of service if you retire after 57, and bam, there you go. You can actually see and count on, here's how much you're going to get when you retire. Now, in addition to that, most of us take advantage of the fact that the state has a 401k or 457B program. And so you can put up to $20-some-odd thousand into your 401k program, depending on how much you earn. So, if you're like, some people are obsessive about retirement, and so they put a ton of money in there. Some just put a little bit. But the point of it is you can put money in that's tax deferred and supplement that already awesome defined benefit plan. So there's a lot of these little laws, and it makes it complicated. And you can tell Shelley's an expert by listening to her. But for those of us like me who don't, all we care about is, okay, so what's this mean for me when I get out? That's just kind of a little nutshell summary.
Okay, the next section we have is on benefits in general. Employees who work, people who are hired half-time or greater are eligible for benefits. When we say benefits, we're specifically talking about dental, medical, and vision coverage. There's also additional types of opportunities for benefits. For example, a medical reimbursement account. You may be familiar with the health savings account. The state does not offer health savings accounts, but the medical reimbursement account is very similar to that. There's also dependent care reimbursement accounts as well as other types of benefits. Criminalists are represented by Bargaining Unit 7 and fall under the Consolidated Benefit Program, also known as COBEN. COBEN monies are provided to the employee as taxable income, and then their benefit cost is deducted from that rate. Employees, oftentimes when people first start with the state, they already have insurance through another person, for example, their spouse or their parents or others. If that's the case for you, when you first start with the state, then you can select the cash option. Employees electing to enroll in health coverage will receive their COBEN allowance toward, again, their benefits are deducted from that. When you enroll your dependents on health coverage, there is a mandatory dependent vesting period based on your total state service. So if you're enrolling, for example, yourself in health coverage, the amount the state would provide towards your health coverage is $569. If you're enrolling yourself and one dependent, the state will provide for your first 12 months of employment, they'll provide 50% of the state's contribution, which is $860. Once you move into your 13th month, from 13 to 24 months, the state provides 75% of their costs. And then once you move into your 25th month, the state provides 100% of their costs. So for example, if you're enrolling yourself and one dependent, the state provides $1,123. And if you're enrolling yourself and two dependents and you met that 25-month criteria, the state will provide $1,469 towards your benefit.
Okay, and I'd like to add a couple of things in. Again, this is from just, the novice on the ground here. I think you might be interested in is the way the state's health benefits work. It's really great that the state is a really huge employer. So similar to the fact that criminalists have a wide range of labs that they could potentially work in because we're throughout the state, one of the great things about PERS and the state's size is it allows us to negotiate with health really good rates. And so what happens as a state employee is, like on your first day of work, you're actually given the choice of which health plan you want to use. And so, for instance, the state has Kaiser, they have Blue Shield, they have, I think one is Health Net. I'm not sure if that's one or not. And then PERS has a couple of sort of specialized, sort of PERS-backed health plans, I think, as well. And so the point of it is you get a menu of potential health benefit providers, and so you can find the one that best meets your needs. And so that, just like with our retirement, our health benefits are really quite good. I mean, obviously we help pay for it. They take money out of our check every month to pay for it, so it's not the free deal that it's sometimes presented in the media, but it's really awesome. And for those of us who have ever had a really serious illness, you're really grateful for the kind of benefit the state provides. All right, so let's talk a little bit about other incentives. Every job has pros and cons and special things that either make it great or make it not so great and you want to leave. We want to focus for a moment on what are some of those less tangible incentives that if you're working as a criminalist, what do you get? And so I'm going to turn it over to, let's say, Nathan. Nathan, of the kinds of extra perks that you think you get as a criminalist or the working environment, what really is attractive to you?
Well, I know you brought up before about the ability to transfer from lab to lab. I don't have a foreseen needing that, but I know others who have taken advantage of the ability to move from lab to lab. Some have been making a commute from the Sacramento area to the Bay Area to the Richmond lab, which is a pretty miserable commute if you live up this way. So I know they've, over time, been able to transfer in from that laboratory to the Sacramento lab and really improve their quality of life, cut down on their commute time, cut down on their commuting costs. So that's always great from a lifestyle standpoint. There's also what they call RDO, or regular day off. So you chill in a way that you work 10 hours or 9 hours for 9 days, and you get the next day off. So you have one day off every 2 weeks, and there's varying schedules that they allow within that RDO plan. So that kind of helps your just general lifestyle perks that are out there. From a professional standpoint, we certainly have the ability to take additional classes at CCI or attend different professional conferences. Now, that's always budget dependent, but certainly every year there are those individuals who are granted the ability to go to a professional conference, learn about new technology, meet others in the field. So you have that networking that goes on with others in the field, and you kind of feel like you're really on the cutting edge of technology and the new developments in the science. So you're not getting left behind. You know what's out there, and you're bound to see these sorts of things in your casework, and you kind of can apply the best technology, or at least bring that information back and suggest it as an improvement to our current system. And there's a process for doing that. So certainly you're not stuck doing one thing, but there is a way to always suggest improvements if there is something, or suggest a new technology that can be looked at in order to make your job better and everyone else's job better.
Nadina, how about you? What kinds of additional factors make your job great?
One of the things that Nathan mentioned was the RDO, and I do take advantage of that. I have every other Monday off, and that is really nice, I have to say. I work 9 hours the other days, but that's a really nice advantage. There is, and this is going to be laboratory dependent, obviously, but our lab does have a little bit more flexibility. Some people in the tox lab come in very early in the morning and leave early. Others of us are not quite as early morning people, and so come in a little bit later, and we have the ability to do that. And that not being so regimented makes, I think, everybody happier. You know, I don't want to go to work at 7 a.m. That's just not me. And having the ability to not have to do that is really nice. And for me, coming to DOJ finally allowed me to really have much more of the personal life I wanted to have. My last job, I was working a lot of hours. I mean, a lot of hours. And that becomes your entire life. And I just did not want to continue in that. Coming to DOJ, yeah, I work overtime here and there, but it's never really required. Once in a great while, it's necessary. Sometimes for court, it's a long day, depending on how far I have to travel, but that's not a routine. That's only once in a while. The rest of the time, I am able to know when I'm going to be able to go home. That has allowed me to plan things in my life. I know that I'm not going to be working 12 hours a day. I know that I'm going to have this day off. I've gotten a lot more hobbies and a lot more in my personal life that I had wanted to do and just did not have the time to do, and that has made a tremendous difference in my life in the 9 years that I've been at DOJ. It made me much happier.
So you're saying that really you're afforded work-life balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would concur. I think most of us would agree with that. That's a nice thing about the department in general. Let me ask you about opportunities for advancement. So obviously someone comes in, they're a criminalist. What kinds of opportunities for advancement are there in the field?
Certainly, I know I came in, entered into the criminalist because in order to obtain these positions, you have to take a testing. They're going to talk about here in, I guess, a bit about how to go through the hiring process. But at the time, I had been on the list for a criminalist, but there had not been a senior criminalist offering as of yet, but they hired me in as a criminalist. And based on my prior experience and the availability of the tests that came available about 2 days after I started, I was able to pass and move up relatively quickly to a senior criminalist position. Typically that takes years to acquire the experience necessary and then pass that test or be eligible for the test and move up in that area, but certainly there is a pathway for advancement in the laboratory system. So you start out as your criminalist, you move up to senior criminalist, and if your goal is higher, there's supervising criminalists, there's laboratory managers, so you can move into that management ranks. Of course, that involves lesser casework and more management, but depending on what your end goal is, if you really like casework and you want to stay on the casework end of things, certainly a senior criminalist is where you want to be. But if you enjoy doing a little bit of casework and managing others, you might want to work up toward that criminalist supervisor level. And then depending on where you want to go, if you just like the management stuff, you can keep working your way up. And there are testing kind of exams that go out, and you can apply, you test, you get on the list, and then you ultimately can interview for that job if you're a suitable candidate. But I have found that certainly there is a pathway for moving up for everyone in the laboratory if you're a hard worker and you are able to pass that test and get on the list.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully we've convinced you that the Department of Justice is the awesome place to work that it is, and that now you have a better understanding of the criminalist position, what they do, the environment where they work, the benefits that they receive. Let's talk a little bit about how do you become a criminalist. And so I want to talk a little bit about the state hiring process. Now, many of you are on this webinar because you either saw or received what we call an exam bulletin. And the exam bulletin says basically, hey, we're going to give a test for the criminalist position, and it had a link on there to this particular webinar. But you can also find that bulletin on our website at oag.ca.gov/careers. You can also find it at CalHR, the state's Human Resources Agency's website. But however you get your hands on it, you look at it, you read it, you determine whether or not you meet the minimum qualifications. The next step is you fill out a standard form 678, which is the state application. And you send that in, which basically is saying, hey, I want to take the exam. The exam process for a criminalist is basically what we call a training and experience questionnaire. So when you think exam, you may be thinking like a multiple choice test or a writing test or a job simulation in a laboratory, Those are certainly types of exams, but in this particular case, the exam really is more of what we call a training and experience questionnaire. Now, what does this look like? Well, we've conducted a study to find out what exactly criminalists do on the job and what kinds of knowledge and experiences and abilities that they have to have in order to be successful on the job. And we create a survey that basically asks you, do you have any experience in this? Or do you have any training in doing this? Or maybe you have both in this. So basically it asks you to rate yourself on a wide range of analytical skills and abilities. So you fill out this survey and you send it in, and the exam is done. So when it comes to us, we score it. And when we score it, we basically take the information you provided, we score it based on how much experience or your training that you have in these areas, and we create a list, and the list is ranked, and it groups the highest scored people into rank 1, the next highest into rank 2, the next highest into rank 3, and so on. And as long as you're in the first 3 ranks, which means you, generally speaking, it's different for every test, but as long as you have like a score of 75, 78 or something like that, above, you're probably going to be in the top 3 ranks. One of those ranks, you're called, we call that, it means you're reachable. And that means that we've determined that you have the training and the knowledge, the experience, that means you would likely be a good person or a successful person on the job. And what that does is, so you've received your score that says, guess what? You have a score of such and such on the exam, and so you're reachable. So once you pass the test, the next step is you're going to apply for vacancies. Now, there's a variety of ways you can learn about vacancies, and one of them is at the oag.ca.gov careers page. The other is at CalHR's website. For this particular exam, the Criminalist exam deadline is November 21st. So that means you have to have completed and submitted your application and your training and experience survey, and it has to be postmarked by close of business on November 21st, 2014. There's a link to it on the screen. And if you have a copy of the bulletin, you already know this information. So you can apply. Once you complete the exam, then you can apply for any jobs. So you've applied for a criminalist vacancy, and you find those vacancies on DOJ's careers page. Once you've applied, then the hiring manager will look through all the applications, identify those that appear to be the best match for the kind of work that they'll be doing. Maybe it's DNA, maybe it's toxicology, maybe it's more latent print related work. They kind of determine, these are the people that really have the kinds of skills or knowledge or training that we're looking for, and then they schedule interviews. And then based on those interviews, they identify those people that they think are the ones that they want to look much more closely at. So they give you a tentative job offer. So once you've got your tentative job offer, then because we're the Department of Justice, we conduct a background check. Now, obviously, if you're going to be working with evidence, if you're a peace officer, there are a variety of classes that require a pretty deep background check. We background check everybody who applies, but they're criminalists, special agents, peace officer kind of classifications. We're really pretty careful about that. So we run a background check. And what does that look like? Well, basically, we're going to be looking into those people that we give a to confirm that they don't have any conditions that make them ineligible for the job. So they have to meet the age requirements, have to have a valid driver's license, they need to meet the educational requirements. But we also look into their past history to find out if there are any issues that would make it that they wouldn't be appropriate for working in a law enforcement setting, such as do they have past felonies or misdemeanors that might preclude them from working here? Do they have a history of the use of illegal substances? Have they, do they have any adverse behavior? Have they been violent and things like that? So the background check is pretty deep, and it uncovers stuff like that that might be back there in someone's deep, dark past. Just because someone has some of these, like if they, the adverse behavior, well, it depends on what it is and how long ago and what the conditions were. So, they would then talk to the candidate about these things. So once you pass the background check, the next step is welcome to DOJ. You've got your preliminary offer, you've completed your background check, and then at that point you actually begin that process of training, working alongside experts in the field, and developing into the first-rate forensic professional and join the team of probably the elite team of forensic professionals here in the state of California. So that brings us to the conclusion of our webinar today. So you may notice that on your screen is a little question box. It's for GoToMeeting. It's the webinar service that we use. If you have any questions that you would like to ask us regarding the criminalist position, the application process, benefits, go ahead and type your questions into those question boxes, into the question box, and submit it, and we'll take a minute to answer those questions. So I'm going to open up the question box